So I'm gonna talk you through how to use this website here in a moment, and this is filmdo.academy, do with 2 O's, which is a Thai word meaning to watch or see. So Film Watch Academy, if you combine those 2 languages. I'm going to talk you through this shortly, but first of all, I've got a few slides. I'm going to talk a little bit about just some provocative questions we've had come up, that kind of thing, and a little bit about our kind of sort of ideology and how we're thinking about language education. And I'm kind of hoping that that sparks some discussion in the roundtable that we're going to have coming up pretty soon. But this is our first roundtable, so I am just going to start the conversation really with these few slides. So the topic that I thought I'd go with is an interesting question that we had come up internally last week, where we were saying, how do we actually measure engagement? We're telling people that our tool can engage students more, and that's because we've seen it firsthand, but we haven't got any data that proves that. So we've been looking at, like, how can we prove to teachers, prove to you guys that what we're doing is engaging. So I thought this is quite interesting, because now that we're all online and we're talking to you online right now, if I was in a classroom with you, I could sort of, from my teaching experience, I can kind of holistically probably pick up if people are a bit disengaged, if they're looking at their phone a little bit too much, and I can adapt my class a little bit based on that. But because we're on a webinar, I've got no idea how many of you are already like doing your shopping on Amazon or replying to emails at the same time, maybe not fully engaged. So I think it's kind of an interesting topic on that front. But also, because I used to work in education and I now work in technology, I've noticed that this word engagement means totally different things to these 2 groups. It's not really the same word. And it's interesting when you're talking about language learning too, to realize that a word can mean something quite different just because different people said it. So when technology talk about engagement, when tech companies talk about engagement, they have engagement metrics, and they're always talking about like how many people clicked on something and how many people shared something and liked something and that sort of thing. And none of those numbers tell you about engagement in the traditional sense. You've got no idea if someone was clicking on the article because it had a clickbaity title, if they spent a long time there because they were half asleep while scrolling down. We've got no idea if they were more engaged in an article because they shared it more. They might have all sorts of other motivation for that. In fact, a lot of blogs, their kind of business model is almost to write unengaging content, because they make money when you drift off halfway through reading a blog and you click on the ad on the side, or you click on a different article because you get so bored halfway through. So actually, the way that tech companies measure engagement and the way teachers measure engagement is totally different. So I think this is quite an interesting topic to explore. But there's also the fact that tech companies are quite, they handle their research and their data quite differently. They kind of have a much quicker response to decide if some data is applicable or not. If you have a classroom of students, you kind of learn who they are over the course of a year or over several years. But if you're a tech company, you make decisions very, very quickly. So I've got a story I like to use at this point from when I started teaching, and I was very, very new and still learning my way. And I think stories are very engaging, but we'll come back to that in a second. Now, when I very first started teaching, I had this idea on the very first Friday where I said, I'm going to take a load of lollipops to class with me, and I'm going to give each student who's done their homework a lollipop. And then anyone who hadn't done their homework, I gave them like an additional task, because I didn't want anyone to feel left out or go hungry. So they had an extra little task to get their lollipop. I didn't really have any thought about this helping them study in any way. I was really trying to just buy approval my very first week of teaching, because I didn't know what I was doing. But of course, 90% of my students had done their homework, they get a lollipop. But then something strange happened, because then Monday, next lesson, 100% of my students have done their homework, because they thought they were going to get another lolly, right? So everyone comes in, teacher, here's my homework, where's my lolly? And I was like, oh, you don't get those every day. That was just a one-off. But even if they did get them every day from then on, eventually I kind of feel like they'd probably get a bit bored of lollies, and it might not work as a motivational tool anymore. I kind of know from psychological research a little bit that it's actually kind of a negative in a way, because they would have a certain level of cognitive dissonance in their mind now about why they do their homework. They were doing it for getting into a good university or for the joy of learning or to make their parents proud. And now they're doing it for lollipops. Suddenly, the other reasons lesser in their mind. Suddenly there's a kind of conflict of what is the reason for why they do their homework. It's called cognitive dissonance, and it could actually be quite negative. Now, we all know as teachers or anyone who's a parent or a manager, the rewards don't really work. There's all kinds of first-hand experience of that, but there's also lots of research about how if you give someone more salary and they actually do a worse job, all those kind of things. But if I was a tech company, I would measure very short-term results, and I would look at the fact that on the Monday more students did their homework, so therefore they must be more motivated or something. And that would then fit into my tech product. Whereas a teacher, when you're in the classroom the whole time, you kind of know that pretty shortly afterwards there's a drop off, and actually it was a negative thing overall. And there's also the fact that I'm measuring totally the wrong thing there, because the point is 100% of the students had done their homework by the next Monday, but because they were doing it just to win a lollipop, their homework was a much lower standard. And what we're really interested in is, are they learning from their homework? Did they get involved in it? Did they enjoy doing it? All those kind of things. And knowing that they had done it or not is very, very binary. And really, overall, I just think tech companies are quite bad at this. What can we measure? And therefore, that means this is good or bad. So should we even measure something like that? Now, this is one of my favorite examples, because tech companies are all about this. Ed tech companies, every ed tech product I've ever seen has this like progress bar that's like, you have completed module 1, congratulations. This is completed. You need to do this before you've completed this. And every ed tech product I've seen just has one of these big progress bars, because it is motivating for people to complete X, Y, Z. But it's actually pretty bad for education, because one of the reasons we enjoy seeing things completed is the Zagornik effect. Zagornik was in a cafe in Russia about 100 years ago, and noticed that the waiters all remembered every single person's order perfectly until they had paid their bill. And then they wouldn't know who the person was, wouldn't know what they had ordered. All this sort of stuff all just leaves their brain. It's no longer in their memory once the transaction's completed. And that's one of the reasons that we kind of enjoy seeing progress bars completed, because it tells us that we don't have to hold on to that information anymore, that we can just drop it and move on. So that makes a progress bar just about the worst thing for education. It's literally saying to your brain, you don't need to store this information anymore, let it go. I actually think that in many ways, a degree certificate is just about the worst thing for education. It tells you, first of all, it tells you you can stop learning now, you know it all, but it also says you don't need to retain that information anymore. You've completed that task. So progress bars are awful for education, but every edtech product puts it in because they measure very short-term data. It made people do their homework more, so therefore it's good. But as teachers, we kind of know that's not true. So we're in an interesting place because we've got educational people and technical people having these kinds of arguments. Now, this is another edtech company I've seen recently, and it's called BrainCo. And they made these EEG sensors for students to wear. Now, I think they kind of made it for personal study, but there was a school in China that did trials last year where every student wears an EEG sensor, and their teacher can see this light on the front go red when their focus drops. And actually, their parents can see a readout as well of how focused they were all day. And they actually stopped this trial, thank God, but it was mainly to do with data sharing. Now, my first thought about this was that EEG sensors are really, really like terrible. Sorry, not terrible. They're very inaccurate. They're not perfectly accurate. So if you're a student who just gets the bad dud sensor one day, or it's not been recently cleaned or collaborated, then you've got detention and you're grounded for the weekend because you weren't focusing enough. And, that's pretty unfair on the child. But again, this isn't where they've gone wrong here. Is they're not measuring engagement at all. They're measuring focus. And those are two very different things, especially when we're talking about education, because some of you may have seen this. This is by Professor Barbara Oakley, and she's got She's got the best-selling course in any subject online. It's called Learning to Learn on Coursera, and she's also the best-selling author of A Mind for Numbers. And she points out about the two different modes of thinking. You've got focused thinking and diffuse thinking. And focused thinking, she's got a diagram here of these pinball tables. Focused thinking is where it's pinging around in one corner and hitting all of the little circles. I don't know what you call them on a pinball table, but it's bouncing around in a very, very focused area of your brain. And it's very good when you are trying to achieve a task. Diffuse thinking, on the other hand, is when you're daydreaming or your mind's wandering a little. And that's where the pinball pings all around the pinball table. And actually, this is where you make new novel neural connections. So if you're learning something, you absolutely need a whole lot of diffuse thinking. And we kind of know from classrooms that if a student's really focused for 10 minutes and then they chat to their friend for a bit or play with their phone for a bit or something, and then a few minutes later they start focusing again, that's not a bad thing. We kind of know that just intuitively from seeing it in class. And that's because that's essential for learning. You actually need this period of diffuse thinking quite regularly. So something like these EEG sensors on your head are absolutely terrible because they're not teaching us, is the student engaged in the material? Are they learning? It's just telling us they're focused, which actually is only half of the process of learning something. That's pretty negative. So again, they've kind of failed to really measure engagement, or certainly in any meaningful way that tells us if someone's learning, sorry. The only real good study I've ever seen is where people have done brain scans of people, scientists have done brain scans of people who are hearing a story or watching a film. This is really interesting because what happens in your brain when you're watching a film is your brain is almost hijacked by the story, and you're almost not in control of what's going on in there. You have, something very positive happens in the film and you actually have oxytocin, and something negative happens, you actually have cortisol, and the areas of your brain light up as if you're feeling the same emotions as that character. Now, there's a lot of people, Professor Barbara Fredrickson, who believes that actually emotions are vital for learning as well. So not only is this person actually super engaged in the film, their brain is working as if they were the character, they're that engaged in the story, but actually it's perfect for learning because emotions potentially helps us learn. And when you think about the fact that we need this diffuse thinking for making novel neural connections, which are going to be easier to recall later, then actually films are very, very memorable and very good for learning. But they might not necessarily teach us too much about learning a language. Now, back in the 70s, Professor Stephen Krashen he was in New York, and he noticed that the people who learned English the best after they moved to America weren't the people who were doing a lot of language classes. They were just the people who got the most input. His theory was that you can learn a language 100% through input, just listening to the radio, just watching films, better than if you went to language classes in that same time. Now, more recent experiments have found that it's probably not completely just watching films. It's a bit more effective if you study a little bit and then watch a film and study a little bit and break it up like that. But also back in the 70s, when he did his experiments, it was probably true that language teachers weren't up to the kind of quality that you guys are. You know, we've learned a lot in 50 years. But I also think he might have missed one of the big vital points about why people aren't using films to learn languages. And that's because if you think about these like progress bars and stuff that edtech companies put in, the benefit that they're getting from this is that it gives you a little dopamine hit occasionally. People are using Duolingo every day, not because it's good for learning languages. It's terrible for learning languages, but because it keeps them motivated to pick it up every day because they get some kind of feedback from it. They get some dopamine and some information that they're progressing in some way. So actually, part of our philosophy really is that what about if we had films which are just about the best thing? It's the most engaging thing you can be doing. You're seeing the language in context and all this sort of stuff, but we add in little dopamine hits, make it more of a game, and make the student get to actually see some kind of feedback so that it keeps them watching as well. So that's going to lead me quite nicely. And I've you know, given you a few provocative questions that we haven't really answered fully yet ourselves, and a few ideas that I'm hoping that you guys can argue with me about in the round table in a minute, because we'd love to, you know, learn more and improve our understanding as well. But before that, I'm just going to talk you through our own website and show you how you can use this. I'm just going to take a couple of minutes on this. So this is filmdo.academy. And you can come here right now and click on one of these languages and play a video, which is going to have questions in time for your students. But before I show you that, I'm just going to show you how to create a class for your students, because it's I mean a video with interactions for your students, because it's going to be super easy. And a big part of our thinking is we want this to be as easy and quick for teachers to get in and create content as possible. So I've just clicked sign in on the top right here, and I'm going to click create account. This is where you're going to click if you don't have an account yet. And I'm going to click Rob1 at FilmDo, because I think Rob at FilmDo already has an account. And my username is going to be Rob1 FilmDo. Give myself a password. And I'm just going to create an account. And I'm on this page now, and you'll notice the URL now says /Rob1 FilmDo. So this is my own profile page here. And I'm going to create an interaction. So I'm going to click create new in the top right. And it's going to take me to this screen where I can add in a Vimeo or YouTube URL. If I've gone to YouTube and I found a short film that I think is going to be good to use in class, let's go for a nice fun animation for some young kids maybe. I'm going to copy this URL straight from YouTube and just paste it into this box here. And it's going to take me to this editing screen. Now this video is 10 minutes long, but I'm actually not going to use it all in one go. And maybe I'm going to use this a little bit in class and a little bit for homework. Maybe I'm going to use it over a couple of classes. So I'm just going to use maybe the first 5 minutes today. So I can drag this end time here, and I can drag the start time and cut off maybe the credits at the start as well. And just use this 5 minute of the video. And I want to add some interactions so that the students get some kind of like attention spikes as they go through the video, because we want to get some interesting questions in to keep them paying attention. So at 1 minute, I've not watched this video, so I'm not exactly too sure what happens. But at 1 minute, I want to ask the students a question. I'm just going to click that add interaction button at the top right there and put in question 1. And I'm going to give it couple of answers, A and B, and I can select over here which is the correct answer. Now I can also change how long it's going to be on the screen for. It's going to be slightly timed. So if I want this, I think they need to think about this a bit longer, I can change the duration to 20 seconds. And if I realize that actually I needed it a little later, I needed it at 1 minute too, I can change that at any point there. Now, as I carry on watching this video, you'll see I've got an orange line here now on that. Go back and edit the question and answer text or any of those sorts of things, or edit the time. So now I've got a 5 minute video with one question that comes up, and I'm going to save this. And on my page, you'll see I now have this this film here. I maybe don't want it to say English subtitles in the title, so I can actually just click and edit that. I can add a description. At any point, I can click back here and edit that, change that question. And right here, I can delete this and close it, and it won't exist anymore. Now, that wasn't a great question. I couldn't actually remember where it was. So I'm just going to click on an existing class we've created here, which we've created these so you can just jump in and start using it in class straight away. I've gone to the English section, and I'm just going to show you how one of the videos works. So when I click play, it's going to bring up with a QR code and a URL. And rather than us all joining in here, because I'm using up quite a bit of your time, I'm going to just pretend this other tab is a student's screen. So the student's got an iPad, a laptop, or a mobile phone, and they are going to scan this QR code or take this URL, and that's going to allow them to join in. So we're going to watch this video together as a kind of watch party. I'm going to give myself the nickname Rob again, very original, and it's assigned me a little emoji. I've got the kind of, I don't know, burglar guy with the eye band this time, but it's going to assign me a random emoji. And what we've noticed actually is that one thing that students really enjoy is getting to choose a funny name for themselves and have a fun character. And I can emote as we go through the film with an emotion that'll pop up in the corner with my own little character. Now, when I click Let's Play, what you're going to see is on the teacher's screen, you're going to see this video start playing. And on the student screen, we have a line in the background telling me how far we are to the next question. And the next question is a description of her hair. I think she's got frizzy hair. And I got 5 points. Now, I got 5 points because I answered it 5 seconds into the 10 seconds there. So some of our thinking here is we want this to be a game for the students, not a test. We don't want the person who answers the most questions to be the person who wins. We want there to be some kind of gaming mechanisms in there because of what Stephen Krashner said about it being a low stress environment for them to learn English best. But as we get to the end of the video, and I'm just going to skip ahead to the end here, I'm going to get all my results on the screen here so I can see what I answered incorrectly. And I'm going to be able to, the teacher can click this download results button and they can see exactly who got it right or wrong out of all my students. So this means the teacher can use this as kind of a knowledge check as well. They can use it to see if maybe their questions are too hard, if there's a student who's falling behind a little bit, but they can throw questions into the mix, which are perhaps not even entirely to do with the video, but they're just like knowledge checks that they want to do at the start or end of term. And it's just a kind of convenient place to put it in. But they can also have questions that are very relevant to what's actually going on in the video. Now, we are toying with ideas of different interactions you can get. Currently, it's multiple choice questions, and we're playing with ideas of how we add more gaming mechanisms to make it a little bit more fun for students just than answer the question faster to get more points. Maybe there's some other ways they can get more points to make it a bit more fun for them. And also exactly how we can get this reporting to you better. Right now, you download a spreadsheet, but we can integrate with an LMS or with Google Classroom to put the results there if that's better. I'm going to stop demoing this now because I'd love to hear your thoughts and sort of any questions, really.
Thanks ever so much, Rob. Brilliant presentation. I was there. I was focused. You had my attention completely. Yeah, it's really good. Fantastic. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I'm going to introduce now